After a tough week in Indy, some consensus top 50 players may not even make the top 100 on my draft board. It's the biggest disappointments from the NFL Combine on today's Renner Ranks.
This is Renner Ranks, the ultimate NFL ranking show. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into today's episode of Renner Ranks, your go-to daily ranks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And shout out to those everydayers out there. Don't forget to subscribe, follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. I, of course, am your host, Mike Renner, NFL draft analyst. And today's podcast brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150. If your bet wins, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, we did the top performers, the biggest winners, the past couple episodes, offense, defense. Now we're to the flip side of the ball, flip side of the coin, and the guys who didn't put their best foot forward. But they put their best foot forward because they only have 2 feet, but then they didn't put it forward fast enough, shall we say, because some of these guys did disappoint. Just off the bat, before we dive right into it, some thoughts on my process of the NFL Combine. Again, it's disappointing can be very relative based off of your preconceived notion of a guy. If you think a guy's an athletic project and he tests poorly, that's bad, right? That's something that then you're going back to drawing board and saying, oh, maybe he doesn't have this perceived upside that I once thought he did. If a guy is a polished product already and tests poorly, well, you may not be as worried, right? You're like, oh, okay, well, he actually still can succeed at the next level because he has the skill to do so. So again, it depends on the person. It depends on the player, your thoughts on them beforehand. But at the same time, there's always that in the back of your head. You don't want bad athletes. Kind of on the whole, there's just the track record of them isn't great. And especially if that bad athlete is also undersized. You can get away with it. I like to say you need a way to win in the NFL. I call it trump cards. You need a trump card for a lot of different positions, how your game's going to continue to translate to the NFL. And we'll get to some of those trump cards when we go through these prospects in a minute. But if you don't necessarily have that, if you don't have an athletic trait that I think can translate at a particular position, that's when you start to worry about a guy's prospects. So let's get into the positions. Quarterback, obviously, again, not going to go through quarterbacks in the NFL Combine. Now let's get into the running backs, where a couple guys really stood out to me in terms of disappointing, in terms of actually going to move them down my board after what I saw. The first one, probably the biggest one, has to be Oregon's Bucky Irving. We've talked about a guy whose tape is fairly electric, right? I mean, he's a jitterbug, undersized type of running back. Comes in 5'9", 192. That was fine. That we expected. He was never going to be big. But 4.5, 540, only 52nd percentile, 29.5-inch vertical, 5th percentile, and a 9.7 broad jump, which is 27th percentile. So well below average athletic testing for a guy who kind of relies on that athleticism, right? He's not going to break tackles with power. He's not going to run through, a linebacker, right? So a guy who has to play in space, but then you worry, is that a guy who's dynamic enough to be a pure space back at the next level? So those people are really high on him. Had him as top 5 back in this class. I don't even think I'm going to have him as top 10 back in this class. That's just not a path towards a big role in the NFL. There's not a lot of guys who are willing to give that because of what you're giving up as a 192-pound running back in pass protection. So even if you're a good pass catcher, you still worry about that guy having to pass protect, and just a lot of teams won't put that guy in the football field. The other one who I actually mentioned this guy on the Bleacher Report stream I did of winners and losers, and I regret it because I don't think he's actually that big of a loser, and I actually don't think I'm going to move him on my board because of his combine. And it's Audric Estime, the Notre Dame running back. A lot of people saw the 4.71 40, worst of any running back combine, and thought, that's horrible. And hand up. I had to do that stream the next day, hadn't really done my due diligence, and I put him on that list because that's not a good time. I expected a lot faster. His combine over-under was 4.5, and that's where I expected him to run at Indy, just based off his tape. But goes 4.71, But a 38-inch vertical and a 10.5 broad jump from him are way more indicative of how he plays. Way better numbers to rely on when you're talking about how his explosiveness will translate to the next level than that pure 4.71, which a lot of that's due to just like fine long speed, just like lackluster long speed. 38-inch vertical and 10.5 broad tells me that he has that short air explosiveness to burst out of his cuts and hit the hole at a high level for a 220 plus pound running back. So not worried about him. Also came in with fairly long arms, 32 3/8 inches. That's good. So I'm not moving automatic estimate, but the one big back I am a little worried about after this, Bralen Allen, doesn't run the 40 after he's, a Bruce Feldman's freaks list guy. They say he runs in the low 4.4s, doesn't even try. And then his numbers at 235 pounds after being listed at 245, so comes in lighter, and only a 32-inch vertical and 9.9 broad jump. Those are not great numbers for a running back. You're talking about between him and Audric Estime, 6-inch difference in the vertical, 8-inch difference in the broad jump. Yeesh. And the thing is, everyone's giving him the Derrick Henry comp, and obviously Derrick Henry comes in way bigger than him at the combine. But the big thing about Derrick Henry that's kind of underrated, Derrick Henry had 33-inch arms. Though that is a big way in which he wins at the next level, is that stiff arm, is that ability to get to linebackers, defensive backs, safeties, who are defensive backs. I don't know why I said that. Before they get to him, right? With that stiff arm. Bralen Allen only 31.25-inch arms, which are, good size for a running back, but not dominant. He at 235 pounds, he's not going to look like Derrick Henry at the next level. And flat out did not test like Derrick Henry. So those are worrisome numbers, in my opinion. Even for a 235-pounder, I would have hoped for bigger than that. I mean, just compare him to 235-pound linebackers in this class, right? A lot of the 235-pound linebackers tested out a lot better than he did. And those are the guys that are going to be tackling him that he's supposed to be having to run through. I don't know if that's necessarily going to be the case at the next level. All right, wide receiver position, where I said on the top performers episode, everyone won. One guy makes my disappointment list, and it's Brendan Rice, the USC wide receiver. Billed as having some of the best deep speed in this class. He runs a 4.5 at 6'2", 208. Not bad by any means. Again, but when you're build for your athletic traits better be sick. And so a 4.5 with a 9.11 broad jump, 35th percentile broad jump is no bueno, in my opinion. 37-inch vertical, a little bit better, but that's just not a winning combo for a guy who's already kind of awkward as a route runner. Does 13 bench press reps as well. That's, fine. That doesn't bother me. That doesn't move the needle for me whatsoever. But the 4.5 and 9.11 broad jump are worrisome, especially when, again, he's billed as a guy who's winning with this deep speed, with this vertical ability. That doesn't scream vertical ability, in my opinion, in the NFL. So not going to be a top 100 player on my draft board after his pre-draft process. We'll get back to the disappointments in just a second. But first, today's podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockdown and shoot your shot. Visit FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Onto the tight end position, where Jatavian Sanders has to be one of the biggest fallers over the weekend at the combine. Another guy where he's tight end 2, or was tight end 2 on a lot of boards, consensus board top 50 player, tight end 2 for a lot of people because of athletic traits. It's not because he's a polished route runner. He's far from that. It's not because he's shifty, capable route runner. You really don't see that much on his tape. It's because they thought he had high-end explosive ability. He ran a 4.69 40. One of those slower ones of the group. Still solid. I mean, that's still good enough to win at the NFL, right? 69th percentile. It's still a plus above average athlete. But 4.69 40s, that's not putting you into the second round just off of that. That's not the kind of explosibility that just gets you into the second round. 4.32 short shuttle, 70th percentile. Those were the drills he did. Doesn't do anything else. And what somewhat that says to me is that the 245 pounds he comes to the combine at is not what he played at Texas at last year. On tape, he looked in the 230s, in my opinion. Just from build-wise, I would have said he was about 235 pounds. So I'm guessing he put on some weight that was maybe not necessarily the best weight to get to that number. And then he runs slower. So either you're getting a very undersized explosive tight end or getting a somewhat undersized, middlingly explosive tight end. Either way, I'm not sure I see enough from him as a pure route runner to ever go to bat for him as top 100 player, just given the nature of the impact of a tight end position, especially the fact that he's not like a plus blocker. And I don't think he's ever going to be at that weight. So Javen Sanders, I don't think he's going to be a top 100 player on my board, just flat out. The other one who I'd say had a relatively disappointing combine, but I'm not sure it's bumping him down a ton the way Sanders combine might for me, is Dallin Holker from Colorado State. Now, his size came in better than expected, 241. Was definitely worried about that, but then he also runs a 4.78 at that size. So slower than expected. That's a 47th percentile 40. Not a lot of guys really producing at the NFL level, running that fast. Your best example is probably Jake Ferguson, the Cowboys tight end. He ran a 4.81. But Holker, Colorado State tight end, did look better in the change of direction, or did perform better. 6.8 3-cone, 96th percentile. That is where he wins. He is a good route runner. He can get open on his own, but you still need dynamism and explosiveness to be featured in NFL offenses at a tight end position. And 4.78 may not be getting it done. But then again, the ancillary numbers though. So the 6.8 3-cone, 4.21 short shuttle, it's 88th percentile, and a 10.2 broad jump, 87th percentile. There's still hope. He's going to go to day 3, more likely than not at this point. 5th rounder, somewhere in that mix is where I'd say. At that point in time, more than willing to take a chance on that guy. To me, his profile is reminiscent of Adam Troutman, former Saints tight end, who came out of Dayton. You remember he was like led FCS in receiving yards at the tight end position, but then he runs a 4.8. But he ran a 6.78 3-cone and gets to the NFL, and just like you never quite see him be that productive that he was in college, because again, it takes some speed to beat NFL linebackers. They are fast. They are all faster than a 4.8. So you got to have something to you. And sadly, Dallin Holker, 4.78. I'm not sure that's going to get done. All right, on to the offensive line, where kind of like the receiver position, there weren't a lot of losers. There weren't a lot of guys. I have to stop saying losers, but there weren't a lot of guys that came there who I had high expectations for and fell flat in some way, shape, or form. The one that I'll mention that's worth mentioning is Olu Fashanu, because this kind of went under the radar because it was just a pure measurable, but he has 8.5-inch hands. The literal smallest hands ever measured for an offensive lineman at the combine. 0th percentile hands. The smallest hands. That all of a sudden you're like, why is he just not good in the run game? You know, why can't he sustain blocks the way he kind of can in pass protection? Or at least, like, why doesn't it look like vastly different? He has one of the biggest splits between his performance in the run game and his performance in the pass protection as I've seen for a prospect. It's because he can't latch on, dude. He can't hold on to anything. He's grasping at straws over there with those baby hands. And I can say that because mine are bigger than 8.5. Not by much, but they are bigger. And so Olu, I hope he doesn't get drafted by the Steelers. Any Pickett ever got sacked, they wouldn't be able to pick him up. That's too small of hands. They wouldn't be able to grab each other. It'd be like the guy in Scary Movie 2, grab my strong hand. Neither of them have one. So not great for him, right? But it might just mean that he may never be a great run blocker with hands that small. That's a wild measurement, though, man. I wonder if that's a mistake. That one, crazy. On to defensive tackle, where I'm not sure I'd call anyone, a massive disappointment. There was no one who showed up who I had high expectations for that fell flat. Now, Johnny Newton, obviously, DT2 for a lot of people in this class, first round pick for a lot of people, doesn't test, right? So going to have to wait for his pro day to get those numbers. if there's anyone that I'd say is maybe a little disappointing, I think Leonard Taylor from Miami had a chance to show he was, a higher end traits guy. Was not the case. 5'1", 240, 30-inch vertical, 9'1" broad jump, just meh numbers for a 303 pounder, not an oversized guy by any means. So I thought he kind of just maybe necessarily didn't fall, because I don't think anyone's super high on him, but had a chance to rise up boards and definitely did not. McKinley Jackson, Texas A&M DT, nose tackle, 326 pounds. So you're not expecting, but a 23-inch vertical at that size is pretty rough. I know Tavondre Sweat, people didn't, saw his RAS score afterwards, and it isn't good, but he's 366 pounds, the Texas defensive tackle. You're not going to, I don't care who you are, you're not going to test well at that size. But that's his game. His game is play strength. His game is you don't move this guy. So a 5'2", 40 for him is legitimately not bad for a guy 366 pounds. The weight doesn't seem that much when you are into the mid 300s, right? 366 versus 346 isn't crazy when you're that size, but 246 versus 266 is pretty crazy. And when you're that heavy, you can drop like 30 pounds in a month if you just go on a little bit of a diet. You get a little cardio in consistently. So I think there's more untapped potential if a team doesn't really want him to be that pure space-eating nose tackle and get him a little trimmer, that he could have a little more one-gap potential based off his tape, based off those numbers, truthfully. So there's DT position. On to edge, where, again, edge, it matters a lot, athletic testing. And some guys came and did not tick the box the way I wanted them to tick the box. First and foremost being Bralen Trice from Washington, who had one of the weirdest combines I can remember. He showed up. I've never seen a weight difference like this. He showed up 245 pounds to the combine, Bralen Trice did, the Washington edge. He was listed at 274 by Washington. And by my estimates, just watching the tape, the 274 was accurate. Like, he looked big. That was his game. He's a power player. And I don't know who's in his ear, but they basically told him, you got to hit some athletic thresholds or whatever. So he trims down 29 pounds to run a 4.72, which is, it's solid. If he was 255, 260 pounds, 207, if he was his normal playing weight running a 4.72, that would have been a hit. That would have been a home run, right? That would have been a great time for him. But I don't even know what to make of him at this point, because that's a guy who's, you're thinking, strong side defensive end, a guy who can bull rush at the next level. 245 is not a bull rusher, especially when you only have a 1.65-10 split. So I struggle to see Bralen Trice's projection to the next level with how he wins at the collegiate level, then transferring, and especially when, if he was playing at 270, a lot of that was fake weight. A lot of that was not, muscle. I'm worried. I'm worried about Bralen Trice. Austin Booker, I'm also worried about. The Kansas edge. Obviously, I was very high on him going in to the Senior Bowl, going into this offseason, but the guy hasn't played a ton of football, and I expected him to test way better than what he did. So it comes in 6'4", 240, way undersized, right? That's skinny. So you're expecting, he even said, I want to run the 4.5s. You're on a 4.79. Usually when someone says they expect to run in XYZ range, they're within 1/10 of a second. They're not over 0.2 of a second off of that. 4.79 at 240 is awful. That's bad for a tight end. And this guy is rushing the passer. 32.5-inch vertical, also below 50th percentile. 10-foot broad jump, at least respectable. But man, I don't know what to make of Austin Booker at this point. Maybe he can redeem himself at his pro day, but they're starting to maybe you're starting to see reasons why the guy couldn't even see the field at Minnesota his first 2 years, despite talent being off the charts. So yeah, Austin Booker, not great for him. Two other guys I'll mention who I thought had good opportunities and maybe just kind of squandered them, just didn't quite do enough. Chris Braswell, the Alabama edge, 6'2", 251. He was a freaks list guy. I think it was like top 10 the freaks list. 4.6, great time for him. Like, that was what you expected. But then a 33.5-inch vertical and a 9.7 broad jump. Both very middling numbers for an edge. And both very important for him, in my opinion, with how he wins as kind of a bull rusher bend the edge guy, you want a little more get off than that, a little more pop behind him than that. So don't love those numbers for him. I think he's going to end up in the back end of my top 100. Not, I had him closer to the top 50. I had him at the back end of the top 50. I think he's now more of a back end of the top 100 guy. And then Adisa Isaac from Penn State. I know he has some fans. He's long, flexible edge rusher, but I thought he was a little better athlete than this. Comes in 6'4", 247. So again, undersized. You better be an athlete, right? 4'7", 440, 59th percentile. 1.62 is 10 split, 62nd percentile. 35-inch vertical, 69th percentile. 10.3 broad jump, 85th percentile. So definitely a plus athlete, but not a guy that you're drafting with middling pass rushing tools at this point, your pass rushing skill at this point, to bet on him as a high-end project. So I've seen him in some top 50s. He may not even be in my top 100. He's again, him and Braswell is like a back end of the top 100. At least Isaac maybe be outside the top 100 at all. Now, a guy I've seen as a faller that I kind of want to just give some pushback on, Darius Robinson, the Missouri edge. He's 285 pounds, man. I don't know what you expect a 285 pounder to test like. A 4.95. If you just called him a DT, you'd be like, oh, that's a good time. If you just said, oh, okay, just close your eyes and he's a defensive tackle and ran a 4.95. All of a sudden that looks way better. It's just the fact that he's going up against guys all 40 pounds lighter than him running the 40. And yeah, it's not a good time, but 35-inch vertical for a 285 pounder is what he had. That's a great number. That's like, you remember Myles Garrett? Myles Garrett ran like a 4.7 coming out, but then he had a 42-inch vertical. Think of that when you watch Darius Robinson tape. Like, that's more what matters to me, is that just first step, second step. I don't care if in the open field he's not as fast. Now, some of that matters in terms of playing the run against mobile quarterbacks. But to me, Darius Robinson, his combine was not a faller. He was not a faller. Get back to the disappointments here in just one second. But first, today's podcast is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. On to the linebacker position, where there was certainly a faller, in my opinion. And it's Tommy Eichenberg, the Ohio State linebacker. Comes in 6'2", 233. A guy that some people are high on. I've seen him in a lot of top hundreds, not in my top 100, and won't be after this testing. 33-inch vertical, 35th percentile, 9.8 broad jump, 42nd percentile, and a 4.24 short shuttle, which is kind of where he wins, 76th percentile, little short area quicks. But at 6'2", 233, he's not a big – I expected in the 240s based off of just, how he's billed as like a Mike linebacker at the next level. Comes in light and comes in unathletic. That's not a good combo for a lot of positions. And I worried about how he played in space, and that's not alleviating those worries whatsoever. So he was really the only one at linebacker that I thought I had some worrying testing. Now, guys like Junior Colson don't test, the Michigan linebacker, so we shall see when we get to their pro days. Cornerback, I got to stop talking about this guy because at this rate, he might go undrafted. But Kalen King, dude, had one of the worst pre-draft processes I can remember. 5'11", 191, and he runs a 4.61, 18th percentile 40. Oof. His jump's a little more respectable, 37 inches in the vertical, 10.2 in the broad jump. It's not like redeemable. 4.16 short shuttle. DJ said on the broadcast he thinks he's a safety. I tend to agree. I don't know. I don't think that's attainable, especially given his tape in the Senior Bowl this past year for him. Another guy I'll mention that I thought was a little disappointing, Enos Rackstraw, the Missouri corner. Comes in light, 183. Now, I love his build, 32-inch arms at 5'11". That's great for a corner. That's what you want. But only a 4.5, 140, only a 10-foot broad jump. Those are both below the 50th percentile for the position. And again, corners are traits position. And so for as smooth as he is, one, he was never a playmaker at the position. He was never a guy who got his hands on a lot of footballs, picked off a lot of passes, literally did not pick his entire Mercedes career. And then two, 4.51's tough at 183. Because 183 is already like a tough sell. So I don't know. That might not be a top 50 player on my board anymore, even though I love the fluidity of movement. And I think he still has a semi-high floor. I just don't know if 4.51 is going to play consistently at the next level at 183 pounds. That's tough. Now, Terrion Arnold, just give a mention to him. I don't think he was a faller by any means, because I also didn't have him as like a top 10 player. But I think if you had him as a top 10 player in this class, I would reevaluate after he ran a 4.5 and had a 37-inch vertical. 10.9 broad jump better, but like the track record, I think I said this on the Risers pod. If you want first round corners, the guys with high-end tape and then high-end traits, there's just not a lot of busts in that camp. That was, Quinyon Mitchell. That was, maybe you can say Nate Wiggins but he really only did one drill, the 40. So, but it's usually the guys who have the good tape, and then it's just like, middling tools. Now, I'm not putting Terrion Arnold in that camp whatsoever. I'm just saying, putting him in the top 10 in this class, you're basically saying he's a Jalen Ramsey. You're saying he's, just because it's that good of a class, right? You're saying he's a Jalen Ramsey, a Derek Stingley Jr. You're calling him that caliber of a prospect, in my opinion, for in this class to put one of these corners in the top 10. I don't see it. I think he's a fantastic prospect in his own right, but he's probably closer to 20 than he is 10 in this class on my board. So just had to mention that. But again, not falling for me by any means, because I just never was there in the first place. On to the safety position where, geez, there's one school represented here, and it's the U. And that safety duo that was so much hyped going into the season of Kam Kinchens, James Williams, both declare early, and both ran 4.65 40s at the combine. Now, James Williams is trying to transition to linebacker, the 6'4", 231 pounder. He was listed at 215 this season. So he's obviously adding weight to move to linebacker. But he's not even athletic for a linebacker, man. 4.65 40, 30-inch vertical, 9.9 broad jump. Quite legitimately, one of the lower end athletes for a linebacker in this class. And he was a safety last year. That's not selling anyone on his potential traits. I think he may end up 5th, 6th round at this point. And Kam Kinchens may end up on day 3, the Miami safety, after his lackluster Senior Bowl. Goes and runs a 4.65 at, 203 pounds, which is below what he was listed at. So he's not over there gaining weight, trying to be a different player altogether. He's just doesn't have quite the high-end traits. 35-inch vertical, 50th percentile, 9.2 broad jump, 4th percentile. Oof. The name that comes to mind of like the best case scenario with him is Jairus Byrd. So Byrd, coming out of Oregon back in 2009, drafted by the Bills in the second round. He's 207 pounds, and you're at a 4.68 and a 35-inch vertical. So darn near identical numbers there. But Byrd also had a 6.75 3-cone and a 4.1 shuttle. Like, he could change directions. Kinchens, we didn't even get to see those drills. Hopefully we'll get to see him as pro day. I don't know. But that's kind of yikes. If you get one guy, if there's like one guy in NFL history that you can point to, and it was 15 years ago. Tough pre-draft process for those Miami safeties. Unfortunate. There you have it, your disappointments from the NFL Combine. I will be back with my top 100 draft board here. Kicking it off. It may be Friday, but we're going to drop 5 successive episodes. If the first one's on Friday, we're going to go all 5 by the end of the weekend, because I wanted to try to get it all out as quickly as possible for you guys. Don't want to leave you any cliffhangers with the top 100 draft board if you want to just zoom through them to hear who I got, because I don't have anywhere to write these down anymore. This is only the outlet I got. So top 100 draft board dropping later this week. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Until next time, you listen to Renner Ranks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.